So this is my first video. You will probably have to bear with me because I'm not very comfortable behind a camera right now, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. I've been wanting to do this for 5 or 6 years, and I haven't been able to because I've been worried about social repercussions or losing my job, things of that nature. But over the last year or so, some things have happened that have kind of pushed me to do this, to talk about these things, to not be afraid. So I guess the first thing that happened was that I moved to Seattle. I moved from Los Angeles, so I was like, well, it's only going to be a little bit more liberal there. I think it'll be okay. I'm a bit of a contrarian, always been a little bit alienated in my viewpoint, so I wasn't particularly worried. I've been facing a lot of pushback on even my more mild conservative viewpoints. Anything negative that I say about feminism or anything, that can be construed as moderately racist, people just become apoplectic. You can't talk to them. They'll just immediately go into a diatribe about you personally. It's socially crippling. It is professionally crippling. And not having an outlet to be able to talk about these things has been more frustrating than I anticipated. So some of the first few things that happened when I moved here involved Uber, because I Uber all the time. I have a small chihuahua that I carry in a little carrying case. He barely exists, never makes any noise. And a few times, not just one, I have been denied rides, once by a West African lady in a niqab, and twice I have been straight up kicked out of Ubers when they realize that I have a dog. Just like, get out of my car, and they're just like disgusted. Every time I've found this shocking because they're providing me a service, I'm paying them, and I've reported it to Uber, who I've asked repeatedly to put a note on my profile that if you have a religious problem with dogs, not to allow me into your car. And they refuse to do it because of the religious nature. Another instance that I had with Uber, this was last week. We were driving past the Book of Mormon, a sign about the Book of Mormon. And the Uber driver said to me, isn't it illegal? This is like a white American guy in his 50s, like a hipster dude, white hair, beard. He goes, isn't it illegal to talk about other people's religions? How are these guys not arrested yet for making this play? This horrified me. I couldn't even believe when it just come out of his mouth, because this middle-aged American man, that for all reasons that I could see was from America, grew up here, had literally no knowledge of the First Amendment and what it says and your liberty. I told him a little bit about how freedom of speech is inclusive, how it means that all speech is protected. And it's especially unpopular speech. I mean, you don't need to protect speech that's popular. And he just looked at me dumbfounded. And I was like, do you not think that that really should be the case? And he's like, well, what about people's feelings? What about how you make people feel? No one cares. Your feelings don't matter. My feelings don't matter. They don't matter. Another thing that happened since I've been dating here, really tall and handsome, masculine-looking man, just like 6'5". He looked like Captain America. He was just so buff and masculine-looking. He had a little bit of an effeminate voice, which you would expect out here. And a few weeks ago, he sent me a text that said, I cannot date you anymore because I do not believe that you will teach our children that all cultures are equal and to love everyone equally. He was right. I'm absolutely not going to teach my children that. That's garbage. But this man, who is the product of Western society, who has all of the benefits in his life, they're all derived from Western culture. He grew up here. He went to these schools. And the very education that he's gotten has betrayed him and taught him that the West is something that we should denounce, that we should be ashamed of. Then we got into a subsequent altercation where he told me that the genocide that we perpetrated against the American Indians is akin to Muslims invading the West and trying to indoctrinate Westerners and basically wipe out Western civilization as we know it. I also couldn't believe this. This seemed to be something that he had learned in schools and just kind of adopted, but was vehement about it. So I tried to keep my cool and reason with him and see what was the source of these viewpoints? Where did he learn these things? And he just shut down and told me that I had just gotten too ugly. This had become too much of an ugly conversation, and he couldn't discuss it with me. So what we have here is a culture of men who are, some of them are really masculine looking, but they've been emasculated to the point that they dress effeminately, they have effeminate voices, and they cannot hear any contrary ideas without just being absolutely personally offended. And so I started to think about why. Why did this happen? How did this happen to these people? I know that the liberal colleges are part contributors, and I figured high schools are the same way, and elementary schools and middle schools. But what I didn't account for was that all of us have been raised by a generation of idiot feminists, just idiotic, where they taught their children of different genders that they were equal. They never differentiated. They never taught them about gender dynamics, about differences between the sexes. They just taught them that men and women are the same. And so this generation of millennial men they're just trying to be kind and treat everybody equally like their mothers taught them, but they've become emasculated and therefore unattractive to women, to feminist women, which is the irony in that is palpable. But now what we're faced with is dealing with all of these guys who are damaged, and the feminists are, of course, damaged as well. I feel particularly bad for millennial men because they are not responsible for learning these, for being indoctrinated with these feminist viewpoints, and they are trying to do what is right. The vast majority of them are good men. But their very masculinity is demonized on a daily basis, and the social repercussions have been epic and will continue to be epic because we have a generation of men that can't protect the women and a generation of women that can't protect themselves. Another thing that happened previously a few months ago was that I traveled to Europe. This was in late October 2015. I took half the trip with my sister and half the trip alone. I went to Amsterdam, Paris, Austria, Vienna, and Prague in the Czech Republic. So I got to see a lot just in the midst of this Syrian refugee crisis, especially because I was going through train stations and, airports. And so I was able to really be at the heart of this migrant movement. And what I saw was shocking. It had been about 6 or 7 years since I had been to Europe, where I remember kind of a moderate Muslim presence. I don't remember being afraid at any point in my prior travels. But on this trip, I was just looking over my shoulder the whole time. There was just this attitude from these Muslim men that they were ready to take over the West and that I should submit. I was in an Austrian train station and I was surrounded by a group of Muslim men that I could tell just wanted me to get up and move because of their very presence in a Western city. And they were disgusted with me because I was traveling alone. I was in Western garb. And they just couldn't believe that I had the audacity to show my face. I mean, oh my God, in this Western city. And it was appalling. And I didn't get up and move. And I started taking pictures of them. And they became visibly irritated. It was really frightening. And I had a few instances in Europe that were like that. Some guy nearly pushed me off a sidewalk. And in a line at a pot shop in Amsterdam, another guy pushed me out of line to get in front of me, another Muslim guy. They just don't respect women. They don't. And feminism is just bolstering this because they have this dichotomy they can't cope with. They want to promote multiculturalism, but when you bring up to a feminist that Muslims are the greatest oppressors of women, they just melt down. So what we see in these European countries is all of these women welcoming these migrants, just welcoming them. They're welcoming their own destruction. It's madness. And I'm seeing that in the United States a little bit as well. I mean, luckily Obama's term is coming up, and I think things will change if Trump gets the nomination and is elected, which is what I sincerely hope happens. So after all of these things, and just their growing resentment for my ideas, the other day my suite mate in my office just became so angry because I merely said that I did not hate Trump. And then another lady came into my office and she was like, "What did you just say?" Just because I said I did not hate him. I do advocate him. I think I capitulated in many ways by not just outright saying, that he's my guy. But the response, I mean, if the shoe were on the other foot, this would be absolutely, intolerable. They would never allow this. And so I am making this channel because I First of all, I feel a dire need to talk about these things. My viewpoints are not commonly held out here. I feel really intellectually repressed. And I want to open a dialogue with like-minded people, which are very, very hard to find in Seattle. Another reason that I'm making this is because I've recently discovered Milo Yiannopoulos and Gavin McInnes and Stephen Crowder and some other amazing conservative video bloggers that have kind of inspired me to say what I'm thinking and not be afraid of the repercussions. Because regardless of my circumstances, regardless of my life, these things are true. Even regardless of my beliefs, the things that I'm saying, they are truths. They are truths that we need to look at and understand and accept if we're going to save Western society, which I see crumbling. And I'm living in the heartland of this liberal mindset where multiculturalism rules, where female rights are of the pinnacle importance because we live in this oppressive patriarchy where masculinity is defamed and men are just downtrodden. I mean, the men can't be happy like this, right? And women can't be happy like this either. Women don't want to go to work and act like men and forego motherhood and act like that's what's going to make them happy. We're just living in this tremendous social lie, just all of us walking through it all day. I refuse to be afraid of my own ideas, and I refuse to not accept the reality of our lives, and we'll never ever be able to combat our enemy if we can't accept reality as it is. The things that I believe, these should not be fringe beliefs. Saying that women find satisfaction out of motherhood, that should not be something that, appalls people. I'm disappointed in people's inability to see their own truth and to see the truth in the world that they live in. And acting like it's not there is not going to make things better. The Pacific Northwest is kind of this haven for soft, liberal neckbeards, older and younger men that have these domineering wives that bring home the bacon. And the gender dynamic of their relationships is, it's skewed. The man becomes resentful that he's been emasculated. The woman becomes resentful that she has to bear children and work now. I mean, that's a tremendous responsibility. And then their relationships crumble. They get divorced or they don't have kids. And everybody's wondering why. I actually had somebody in Seattle say to me once that all gender differences are social constructs. And this blows my mind because that's patently false. I mean, we have different anatomies and different inclinations. It was just profoundly idiotic. And I said, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that society has imposed all of these differences on men and women? He looked me dead in the eye and he said, yes. And so I started to think about this. This was right when I moved here. And no society has really had a successful matriarchy. I mean, no society. We have to thank the patriarchy for the things that we do have. I mean, and we will see what will happen when we devalue masculinity and when we take that away from young boys and tell them that it's bad. We are seeing a society fall apart. We're seeing the complete deconstruction of the traditional family unit, which in every modern society that has been successful has been the focal point. And we're seeing an entire generation of people, the millennials, my generation, that are ignorant to global issues and that value multiculturalism above everything else, above preservation, above nationalism, which has become a dirty word. These people aren't patriotic. They cheer on the destruction of the West, but are not thinking about the implications thereof, what they'll have to take on as a society. If Islam has a global takeover and is successful in this global jihad and jihad by immigration, the West will be screwed, and the way of life of all of these soft liberals, they'll be stripped of it. The elite is so disassociated and disconnected with what is actually going on in the world that they can't be reasoned with. They won't entertain any opposing viewpoints. And so they're intractable. They're not going to be compromised. I don't really know how to solve this. Of course I don't. I mean, I think the best thing that we can do is for people like me, for people that are living in liberal areas, for women especially, to stop fearing the social repercussions and to say what they're thinking and not be apologetic. to find like-minded people that we can discuss these ideas with, and most importantly, to always entertain opposing viewpoints. I mean, I think the most important thing is that we promote this free idea exchange. It's the basis of our country. It's how all of us have derived all of our individualism. It's really important. So that's why I'm making this channel. Just a little rambling. Let's hope that my later ones are more cohesive. But thank you, and keep watching.